And thank you again for having this interview with me. I know there was a bit of a mishap in getting all the Zoom information and the interview stuff sorted out, but I'm glad we're having this interview now.
Yeah, happy to do it. Thank you.
Absolutely. So as she said, my name's Jariel, and I'm just gonna jump right into it. So my first question, I'm really curious. I did some research. I saw that you used to be a journalist, and I wanted to know how you managed to transition from being a journalist to working in politics, and
Yeah,
what's
that's.
oh
Oh, go ahead.
okay oh and what skills from your previous experiences in journalism helped you make that transition.
So that is a very good question and a abnormal career transition for most. I grew up wanting to be the next Katie Couric and wanting to tell the news. But my first job out of college was on the political beat, and I had graduated in 2007 in the heart of the 2008 primary cycle, which was an open election year, which means lots of Republicans and lots of Democrats are running for president. And South Carolina is an important state in those situations. And there were 20 candidates running for president that year, 12 on one side, eight on the other. And I, being a young journalist who was focused on the young voter turnout, was lucky enough to be able to interview all 20. The pitch that I made to all the campaigns was something that they were all interested in due to the demographic that I was speaking to. And I fell in love with the process of politics and campaigns and how it all works. And I love journalism, but I had never even thought about politics. And so when this kind of new career idea came to me, it was something that I knew I wanted to do. And so I stayed being a journalist until the 2010 cycle, when someone I met throughout the process in 07 and 08 was running for office and called me and said, I want you to come run my campaign. Lots of nuances in between that time. But, it was a tough decision to make. I was leaving a full-time job with benefits and, a clock in, clock out time to something that I had never experienced before. But I was, at the right time in my life that it made sense. And so I was excited to do it. As it pertains to the skill sets, a lot of similar skill sets are required are similar from journalism to politics. You have to learn how to be a good communicator. You have to learn how to be organized and have a good work ethic. All of those things are required in both. And then the reason I got asked to run this candidate's campaign was because he had sent out an email about a month prior to announcing with his press release that he had written. And it was I was BCC'd on it, so hundreds of people got it. And I responded and said, before you send this out, here are some edits I have. And he never responded to me. And I was like, I'm never going to talk to this guy again. He's so mad that I took this document he has shared with all of his friends and family and edited it. And about 2 weeks later, he called me and said, I want to hire you. And I sent that email to hundreds of people, and you were the only one who wrote back with edits. And, being able to know the difference between a good press release and a bad press release is critical in both, obviously, journalism and politics.
So it really comes down on a lot of ways to that communication aspect, but also the relationships you build through communication. Am I right?
No question. Absolutely.
I see. Well, moving on from that, I guess now that you have kind of that skill set, how is that informed, and what role exactly have you played in conventions in the past? And specifically, what role did you play this year in this year's Democratic National Convention?
Yeah, so I have attended, this would have been my fourth convention. In 08, I attended obviously as a journalist. In 2012, I attended as the executive director of the Democratic Party in South Carolina. So I was the lead of our state's daily activities and managing all of the delegates and alternates that attended the Charlotte Convention. In 16, I actually got to just go as a guest, which was amazing. And I did a bunch of TV interviews, just kind of talking about what the election meant and what the convention meant leading into November. And then this time, obviously, we all attended from our couches, but I would have attended. I am currently the chief of staff to Unite the Country, which is a pro-Biden super PAC. And I have been a fan of Joe Biden for a very long time, and a friend of his and his staff. And being able to be a part of his campaign in the way that I am is a dream of mine, because I've wanted him to be president for a very, very long time. So this is something that's been extra special for me.
Huh. Well, that's actually interesting, because I do have an additional, I do actually have a question about that. I wanted to ask how you support the Democratic Party now, but I guess so you mentioned working for Biden. How have you worked with him during this election? What have you done what work have you done in his super PAC during this convention?
So I am the chief of staff to the super PAC. And so our complete goal, once we started in October of 2019, was to raise money and spend money on behalf of Joe Biden. So we did that from October to March in the primary capacity, and spent money in states when he was low on money, and pushed for obviously his success leading into South Carolina and Super Tuesday. And then once he became the nominee, we continue to support him in a variety of paid communication ways, and telling the positive side of his story. So, let the campaign be the negative side, but, we tell the positive side. And specifically as it pertains to the convention, I had no official role in the capacity of the convention, because I'm on the super PAC side. So campaigns and politics are built on soft and hard sides. You'll hear those words a lot when people talk politics and talk money in politics. And the campaign and campaigns, the DNC, the actual campaign entities that work on behalf of the actual candidate hand in hand, is on the hard side of the campaign. And then you have the IE side, independent expenditure side, which is the side I'm on, which can still work on behalf of a candidate, on behalf of a political party, but there's a wall. And so I cannot legally communicate to anyone who is on the Biden campaign. I cannot legally communicate to anyone who works for the DNC. And so we have to run our lanes very separately.
So you run almost in parallel with the campaign, but you don't actually work in hand with them per se.
Correct. We definitely work parallel, and then we never cross paths.
Makes sense. Okay, well, to pivot a bit, going back to your role as executive director of the South Carolina Democratic Party, how did that role affect your time at that convention? What did you do as executive director at your
so executive directors of Democratic parties or Republican parties, they are the lifeblood of how conventions work. So we are in charge of our delegates, whether you have 15 or you have 500, and we are in charge of their daily activities. You put together a breakfast for every day, you have a party every night, and you have to present them with their credentials, and you make sure that they have you're essentially a party planner, a cruise director per se. And you just make sure they have everything they need. Kind of an untold story of being an executive director at a convention is you have to pick up your party's credentials somewhere between 2 and 4 in the morning.
Oh my God.
It's awful. You are met by, typically it's an intern, which, because it's the worst job in the world, but you're typically met with someone who works with the DNC and a cop. They meet you typically in your hotel lobby, or you find a location, and between 2 and 4 in the morning, you have the same time all 4 days. They come to you and they count your credentials in front of you. Because if I walk away from that police officer and that DNC staffer, and I need 67 passes, which is the number I needed in 2012, but I only have 65, that's not their problem. I have to bring that to their attention while we're sitting right there in the lobby of the hotel. And so then it's my job to then give them their credentials that morning at breakfast and say to them, if you lose this, if you break it, if you whatever it, that's it. You're done for the day.
You're not coming back.
We cannot get you we cannot get you extras. You cannot go inside. And it's funny. No one ever tells you that part of being at a convention.
Yeah.
And I remember my first day on Monday morning, I get my time, like 2:20 in the morning, set my alarm, and I'm like, well, I'm just gonna go ahead and get ready for the day. So like I get up and I shower, I put my makeup on, I get dressed, I walk down there, and like this poor DNC staffer is also in their PJs. And I'm like, why in the world am I ready? Because now I'm done and it's 3 in the morning and I don't have anything to do till 7:30. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I learned from my lesson and showed up in pajamas.
Fair enough. All right. Well, it sounds like you definitely had some very interesting experiences working as an executive director. From your experience in 2012, outside of the convention, how did having that convention so close by affect South Carolina Democratic Party operations? To what extent would you say that your operations outside of the direct convention or like if affected the convention, and maybe how did the convention affect you as well?
Due to its vicinity, you mean?
Yes. Sorry, I should have been more.
No. It's because I've been to a number of them, there really isn't that big of a difference based on the location. For us, we were kind of the semi-home state, so I think we probably got a little bit better treatment because of that. And when I say better treatment in convention world, that means hotel location and breakfast speakers, and maybe seat location inside the convention hall.
Yeah.
But other than that, there really it is a well-oiled machine, and things don't really change that much from state to state or city to city and year to year. We had a lot more kind of external events that occurred, right? Like I spoke at an event for Winthrop with Katarina, and those type of things you wouldn't do if it wasn't kind of a home state type experience. But it's a very similar experience whether you are in Charlotte or Philly or Denver. You don't really stray from what happens cycle to cycle.
Huh. Okay, that makes sense. I just never would have thought of it that way. All right, well, so this year, 2020, I guess this doesn't really apply so much to this year, but maybe I can apply this more to 2012. How did y'all prepare prior to the convention for going to it? What sort of considerations did you take into account? And if you have any stories to share from other years as well, that would be great. That would be also super interesting.
Yeah, so I don't really have any stories for this year. I mean, I do know that the staff who worked on the convention worked extremely hard on trying to figure out how to do it virtually and setting up all of the production pieces that were necessary. In years past, a big part of the convention is the delegate selection plan, which is kind of the nitty gritty of presidential politics. You have to select your delegates, and your delegates have to select candidates, and it's based on an equation, and it's a very thorough, intense process. And so that's where it kind of all starts about 9 months before convention. And once that is written, and then the delegates are selected, and then that's kind of when the party planning happens. So there's like this internal party, like Democratic Party situation you have to deal with the delegate selection plan. And then once that's kind of executed, then the party planning happens, and you make relationships with other states and have host parties with other states that make sense to your state. It's party planning, right? So like South Carolina's never going to have a party with Wyoming. It just doesn't make sense. And so, in 12, we had parties with Alabama, with Florida, with North Carolina, obviously. We had one with Tennessee. So, I mean, you do it obviously with states that are similar to yours. And you gotta figure it out. I was lucky to have a hotel in 2012 that had a ballroom. So that's where we hosted our breakfast. Because breakfasts are kind of a requirement for every state to have every morning. Some hotels didn't have ballrooms. So if you were designated a hotel that didn't have a ballroom, you had to rent a tent, and you had to figure out all of the different vendors that were necessary to feed all of your people breakfast every morning. But then also have AV, so your speaker could come. So, there's a lot of pieces, moving parts that are required in the planning of executing a national convention when you're on the state side.
Gotcha. Okay, well, with that, taking that into account, how do you think evolves conventions have changed and evolved in the last 20 years? So how, since you've been to so many, how have you seen maybe the format change and maybe how operations have changed over time?
Um, hold on one second. I'm sorry. Sorry, kindergarten at home is insane.
No, it's okay.
I ask your question again. I'm sorry.
No, so given the amount of time you've spent at conventions and at these last four conventions, um, how have you seen conventions change and evolve over the last 20 years, or I'd say 16, I believe. And how have you seen operations change over time?
Yeah, it's funny. They don't really. It is a very similar process every 4 years. It changes if you have the incumbent or if you don't. It changes if, depending on what part of the country you're in. It depends on how the city is set up. In Charlotte, there was a lot of walking between places because there were hotels close enough to the convention hall that you could walk. In Denver, I was on a bus for 40 minutes every time I had to go to the convention hall. So there was no like running back to my room to get whatever. So, it just depends on all of that, the geographic piece of it. And then I think after 2020, we'll see a huge shift in convention planning. I don't think you'll see a virtual only convention again, assuming that the coronavirus is gone in 4 years, hopefully. But
Yeah.
you will see a huge shift in how it's planned. Like, for example, people loved the roll call that we had in 2020, where people got to see the delegates in their home state. I think you'll see that again. I don't think we will do live roll calls anymore. I think that it will be a taped roll call where a state can turn in their video ahead of time, like they did this past year or this year. So the day-to-day, it's very similar. It changes obviously based on the candidate and all of the pieces I've already mentioned, but you get your hotel and you book your breakfast and you book your speakers for your breakfast and you book your parties and you buy a bunch of swag and, people come and you give them delegate passes and they go about their day.
Yeah. All right, fair enough. So this actually ties right into my next question. How do you feel COVID's impact on the convention has affected messaging and the format? And so I guess just to elaborate further, how do you think changes in the format present this year in this year's convention will affect later ones? So you mentioned the roll call, but I'm curious to see if you have maybe any other ideas for how things might change in the future.
I do think that we will adopt different aspects of this year's convention in the future, like the roll call I mentioned, and I think other pieces. I think you'll see a lot more produced pieces like we did this year, just played in a convention hall. I think that the health crisis will determine a lot of things. The coronavirus may be gone in 4 years, but we may not be in a place where people want to be packed in like sardines in a convention hall. So things may evolve, but I do think that people like the convention aspect of the presidential cycle. I know I missed it. And so I think people will pick the things that people really liked from 2020 and in 2024 find some perfect mesh between the two different options.
Okay, all right. And this is my last question, and just a more general sort of question. I'm curious just to know what you like and dislike specifically about South Carolina party politics and what you might want to change as things go forward. I know that's a very large, broad question, so feel free to take your time, I suppose.
Yeah, South Carolina politics is one of the most unique pieces of our country's politics. It is forever exciting. There's always something hidden behind a door that no one is expecting. It's forever evolving, and it is literally my favorite state to watch. And I'm not saying that because it's my home state, but it's my favorite state to be involved with politically, just because there are no you can't expect something to happen here. If you have expectations, it will go completely the opposite way.
Yeah.
And I think that's exciting. I think that our candidates are exciting, and our trajectory towards the future is exciting. If you would have told me even 6 months ago that South Carolina would be closer in the presidential election than, Wisconsin, I would laugh at you, right? So it is always something that I've enjoyed being a part of. One of our former politicians many years ago said that I always forget, we're too big to be an insane asylum, but too small to be a republic. And I think that is the perfect definition of South Carolina politics, Democrat or Republican. Yeah. And the last piece I'll say that I enjoy about South Carolina politics, being a Democrat, and I would not want to change, is our camaraderie here. I completely disapprove of the way that our country is, the trajectory of our country in the way of partisanship. And I severely dislike the way people treat each other in politics right now. But in my time in South Carolina politics, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, male, female, black, white, if you are on one side and you have someone on the other side, you will always be friends first. One of my, dearest friends when I was executive director of the party was the executive director of the Republican Party. And I have many, many friends in South Carolina who are Republicans. And I think that is a testament to South Carolina and the way we treat people and the way that we can put our differences aside to be humans and friends. And it's not like that in every state. Some people may say it is, but I know for a fact it is not. And so I'm very proud of our state for being that way. As it pertains to things I'd want to change, it's hard to say. I think we're in a place right now that I would have never guessed we would be, with a candidate running for U.S. Senate that actually may beat Lindsey Graham, and Joe Biden may actually beat Donald Trump. I mean, those type of things I wouldn't have even asked for in the past, because I would have thought that they were unattainable.
Yeah. I wouldn't have expected these things even 4 or 5 months
right.
ago. I agree.
Right. And so I appreciate that's where we are. And so I can't wait for the future.
Yeah, no, I'm inclined to agree. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure interviewing you.
Oh, thank you. Well, if you need anything else, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to help.
Absolutely, will do.
Great. Thank you so much. And Katarina, good to hear from you.
You have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.